The message began as a whisper through the endless dark, across the cold silence of space, through the dust of forgotten worlds and the quiet hum of dead satellites. A single distress signal escaped from a small blue-green planet called Voran Prime. It was faint, filled with static, but the meaning inside it was clear. A desperate cry for help. To any who can hear this, "We are under attack. Please, someone help us. We cannot hold much longer." That was all 7 seconds of broken sound, but those 7 seconds changed everything. Voran Prime had always been known as a world of peace, and the Vorans were gentle beings, tall, thin, with pale silver skin and soft, glowing eyes. They lived in cities built like gardens, full of music, sculpture, and light. They had no weapons, no soldiers, no armies. Theirs was a world that never learned to hate, until the day the Karn Horde came. No one knew where the Karn came from. Some said they were machines left behind by an ancient empire. Others whispered that they were once living creatures who had replaced their bodies with cold metal to escape death. Whatever the truth was, one thing was certain. The Karn did not talk. They did not negotiate. They only consumed. They fell upon Voran Prime like a storm of knives. Cities burned. Oceans boiled. Skies filled with their black metal ships. The Vorans sent out a call for help to the entire galaxy, begging for rescue. Their message reached hundreds of worlds. The trade guilds of Ikara, the empires of Zelthar, the highborn fleets of the Vexari Dominion. All received the cry, and all turned away. The galaxy knew what it meant to face the Karn. Entire civilizations had been erased. To go against them was suicide. So one by one, the great powers of the galaxy went silent, pretending they had never heard the call at all. But someone did hear, and they did not stay silent. Far away, beyond the outer rim, on the storm-scarred world called Earth, the message reached an old listening station buried under Antarctic ice. The humans had been monitoring the emergency channel since they were invited, reluctantly, to join the Galactic Council a few decades ago. When the transmission came in, the operator froze. He replayed it once, then again. Then he sent it directly to Admiral Lena Hart, commander of the Terran Expeditionary Fleet. Within minutes, alarms echoed across every human shipyard in orbit. Orders were shouted. Engines roared to life. Humanity was moving. On the bridge of the flagship HMS Vanguard, Admiral Hart stood in silence, staring at the trembling hologram of Voran Prime. Red icons marked the planet's orbit, hundreds of Karn ships surrounding it like vultures. "Estimated survival time?" she asked quietly. 32 hours, Admiral," replied the AI. "Less if the main defense grid collapses." Hart's face was unreadable. She had seen too many wars, too many burned worlds. The galaxy called her kind Deathworlders, creatures from the most violent, unforgiving planet ever known. To the other species, humans were half savage, half legend, too emotional, too reckless, too dangerous to trust. But when someone cried for help, humans always came. Hart turned to her officers. "Send word to the fleet. I want every combat-ready ship in range. We launch within the hour." "Ma'am," one of her lieutenants said carefully, "the Council has not approved intervention." Hart's lips tightened. "The Council can debate while others die. We'll move without them." The room fell silent. Every soul on that bridge knew what that meant. A direct violation of the Galactic Peace Accord. But no one objected, because that was who humans were. When the signal of distress echoed through the stars and everyone else turned away, humans ran toward it. The fleet gathered in orbit like a storm forming on the horizon. Dozens of warships, carriers, and rescue vessels took formation, each one bearing the mark of Earth and its colonies. The dark steel hulls gleamed in the light of their home star. On every ship, men and women prepared for battle. Some were soldiers, others engineers, medics, and pilots. All carried the same thought in their hearts. We are going to save them. Captain Aaron Malik, commander of the HMS Resolute, stood by the window of his bridge, watching the stars beyond. His hands were clenched behind his back. "Sir," said his young ensign, "the Vorans are strangers. We don't even know them." Malik's voice was calm. "Then let's introduce ourselves properly." The ensign blinked. "By fighting for them?" The captain smiled faintly. "By showing them what humans do when someone calls for help." The countdown began. Engines burned. Shields flared. And in that moment, somewhere deep in the black sea of space, the Vorans huddled beneath their burning sky, believing no one would come. They didn't know that a fleet of monsters, born from a world of storms and death, was already on its way. They didn't know that humanity had heard them, and the Deathworlders were coming. The human fleet tore through the dark of space like a wave of fire. Engines burned blue against the black, and hundreds of steel giants moved as one. Their hulls carried scars from old battles, and their names were written in stories of sacrifice: Resolute, Vanguard, Erebus, Hope's End, Morning Star. These were not new ships, not shining symbols of empire. They were old, dented, and deadly, like the people who built them. Inside every ship, hearts beat faster. No one spoke loudly. There was no cheering, no prideful music. Just the sound of breathing, the hum of the engines, and the quiet knowledge that they were heading straight into hell. Humans were called. Many names in the galaxy. Some said Deathworlders, because they came from a world that tried to kill them every day. Others said madmen because they ran toward danger instead of away from it. But among themselves, humans had a simpler word: family, and family never ignored a cry for help. Captain Aaron Malik stood on the bridge of the HMS Resolute, watching the warp tunnel swirl around them like rivers of light. His reflection glowed faintly on the glass, eyes sharp and tired. "Status?" he asked quietly. "All systems stable, sir," his first officer replied. "Fleet formation holding. Estimated time to Varan Prime, 30 hours. Malik nodded, but his thoughts were far away. 30 hours. For the Vorans, that might be too long. He could almost hear their voices. The broken call from that message. The trembling plea for mercy. He closed his eyes for a moment. "They won't die alone," he whispered. Across the fleet, soldiers sat in silence, polishing their weapons or staring at old photos. A young medic named Elena Cho ran her fingers over a small bracelet made of copper wire, a gift from her sister before her first deployment. She had treated soldiers before, but this would be different. These were aliens. Peaceful, fragile beings. She didn't know what they looked like or how they lived. But she knew they were afraid. And she wanted to be there, to tell them that help had come. In the hangar bay, pilots climbed into their fighters. Engineers checked the reactor cores. Drones buzzed through narrow corridors, scanning for faults. It was a ritual humans knew well, preparing for war. But this war was not for territory. Not for revenge, it was for strangers. For compassion. Admiral Lena Hart stood at the center of her command deck aboard the HMS Vanguard. Her voice was calm, yet it carried power. "All ships," she said, "begin combat readiness protocols. Our priority is defense and evacuation. We're not here to conquer. We're here to save lives." A dozen captains responded in unison. "Yes, Admiral." Hart leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "And remember, if the Karn Horde stands in our way," she paused, her tone hardening, "then we show them what happens when Deathworlders protect the weak." Silence followed. Then someone whispered, "Aye, Admiral." As hours passed, the stars shifted. Vast systems blurred by. Frozen planets, empty moons, abandoned stations. To most species, the void between stars was terrifying, endless, lifeless. But to humans, it was something else. It was home. They had crossed it before, to fight wars, to build colonies, to search for new hope. And they would cross it again, no matter how far. Deep inside the fleet's communication room, signals buzzed and lights blinked. The Voran transmission repeated again and again, a broken voice crying through the dark. "Please, someone help us." The operator's throat tightened each time he heard it. He looked up at the stars and muttered softly, "Hold on. We're coming." Back on Earth, the Galactic Council argued. Human representatives were absent, their seats empty. They acted without permission, shouted a Vexari diplomat, his tendrils quivering. "They are violating peace law," another alien replied. "Yes, but they are heading to Voran, Prime, to fight the Karn." Silence followed. Every species in the room knew what that meant. No one had ever returned from a direct battle with the Karn horde. No one. "They'll die," someone whispered. But even as they said it, a quiet realization filled the chamber that humanity already knew. And still they went. Meanwhile, far away, the human fleet neared the edge of Voran space. Their scanners began to pick up faint energy spikes, the echo of explosions. Captain Malik stood straighter. "Visual contact soon," he said. His crew tensed. "Open all channels," he ordered. "Broadcast one message." The comm officer nodded and sent the transmission. Across the void, through the ash and the fire, a single human voice echoed out to the dying world below. "This is the human fleet. Voran Prime, hold on. You are not alone." On the surface of the planet, hidden beneath burning skies, a small Voran child clutched her mother's hand. They were surrounded by rubble, by silence, by the smell of smoke and loss. Then suddenly, her translator device flickered and she heard that message. A voice. Strong, warm, human. The child looked up at the fiery sky and whispered, "Mother, someone's coming." And above them, streaks of light began to fall from the heavens. The Deathworlders had arrived. Voran Prime was a world that once sang. Its cities were built like living art. Silver towers wrapped in vines, lakes glowing with blue light, and bridges that shimmered like crystal rainbows. The Vorans had spent centuries making their home a garden among the stars. But now that garden was dying. When the human fleet arrived, what they saw broke even the hardest hearts. The skies were full of black smoke and fire. Vast Karn warships hung in orbit, releasing storms of burning metal that fell upon the cities below. Every few seconds, the planet shuddered under another blast. Admiral Lena Hart stood at the command deck of the HMS Vanguard, her jaw set tight. "All ships form defensive pattern Delta 3, she ordered. "Protect the planet. Get our fighters out there now." The humans didn't hesitate. They never did. Dozens of fighter wings burst from hangars, streaking toward the enemy lines like silver arrows. Frigates and destroyers moved into formation, their railguns charging with a low, thunderous hum. The first human volley hit like lightning. 3 Karn cruisers exploded instantly, their black armor shattering into glowing shards. The rest of the horde turned, mechanical minds shifting to a new target. The humans. They fired back. The space around Voran Prime lit up with fury. Explosions bloomed like suns, tearing through ships from both sides. Fragments of metal spun away into the void, silent and deadly. Inside the Resolute, Captain Aaron Malik gripped his command chair. "Shields to full. All batteries, fire at will." His crew moved with grim focus. The deck trembled under their feet as cannons roared, spitting tungsten rounds at near light speed. One by one, enemy vessels fell apart under the human assault. But the Karn were endless. For every ship destroyed, 2 more appeared from the black. Malik's first officer shouted over the alarms. "Sir, we're outnumbered 10 to 1. "I know," Malik said calmly. His eyes burned with quiet fire. "Then we make every shot count." On the planet below, the Vorans could see flashes of battle painting the night sky. They huddled in shattered halls, listening to the thunder from above. One elder, his voice shaking, whispered, "Who dares fight the machines?" A younger Voran pointed upward, where trails of blue light crossed the clouds. "They call themselves humans," she said softly. "Deathworlders from the stories," the elder trembled. "Then we are truly saved, or truly doomed." But when the humans spoke through the planetary broadcast again, calm, steady, and warm, even the trembling hearts of the Vorans felt a spark of hope. "This is Admiral Lena Hart of the human fleet, Voran Prime. We have engaged the enemy. Stay hidden, stay alive. We will not let them take your world." In orbit, the battle turned brutal. The HMS Erebus, one of the oldest destroyers in the fleet, took a direct hit to its reactor core. The ship split apart in a blinding flash, scattering debris across the sky. Everyone watching went silent for half a heartbeat, then fought harder. On the Resolute, damage alarms wailed. Smoke filled the bridge. A console sparked beside Captain Malik, burning his arm, but he didn't move from his station. "Target that dreadnought," he shouted. "All forward guns." A massive Karn command ship loomed ahead, easily 3 times the size of his vessel, covered in jagged armor and red energy veins. Its weapons began to charge. Malik's helmsman looked back, fear in his eyes. "Sir, it'll tear us apart." The captain smiled, tired, fearless. "Then let's make sure it remembers who we are." The Resolute roared forward, engines burning white-hot. The railguns fired again and again, punching holes through the dreadnought's hull. The Karn ship answered with a beam of molten plasma that sliced through the Resolute's flank. "Brace!" someone screamed. The bridge shook. Metal screamed. But the humans didn't stop. They pushed closer, until the dreadnought filled every view. On her flagship, Admiral Hart watched in shock as the Resolute made contact. The human ship rammed straight into the Karn behemoth, detonating its reactor in a burst of light that outshone the planet's sun. The explosion tore through space, ripping apart half the enemy formation. Silence fell across every human channel. Then someone whispered, voice trembling with pride, "The Resolute did it. They took the dreadnought with them." Hart closed her eyes for a moment. "Rest easy, Captain Malik," she said softly. "You bought them a future." When the smoke cleared, the Karn fleet was broken. Some ships tried to flee. Others were hunted down by the remaining human fighters. The battle wasn't over yet. But for the first time since the Vorans sent their desperate call, hope began to bloom again. On the surface, a small Voran girl stared at the sky, her eyes wide. "Mother," she said, pointing to the burning stars. "The fire in the sky. It's turning away." Her mother nodded, tears falling down her silver cheeks. "Yes, child. The humans are winning, and above them, among the ruins of war, humanity kept fighting. Not for glory, not for power, but simply because someone needed them to." The battle for Voran Prime raged like a storm that refused to end. Even after the death of the Resolute and the destruction of the Karn dreadnought, the sky still burned. The humans held the orbit, but the Karn were relentless. Wave after wave of metal ships, crawling out of the dark void like a swarm of nightmares. Admiral Lena Hart stood on the bridge of the HMS Vanguard, her eyes sharp and weary. The air smelled of ozone and smoke. Around her, crew members shouted reports and commands, their voices steady even as the ship trembled under constant fire. "Admiral, the eastern flank is collapsing," cried the comm officer. "Send the Aurora and Braveheart to reinforce," Hart replied quickly. "And tell the Endeavor to cover the civilians. No matter what happens, those transports get through." The humans were evacuating survivors from the planet below. Voran families hiding in ruined temples, shelters, and craters. Dropships darted through the chaos, dodging plasma bolts and falling debris to pull them out. Everyone that made it back carried the terrified faces of beings who had never seen war, until humanity brought them hope. Down on the planet, the Vorans waited in silence. From deep in the underground chambers, they could hear the thunder of the battle above. The earth trembled, dust falling from the ceilings with every explosion. But every now and then they saw flashes through cracks in the stone, streaks of blue light from the human ships, defying the black swarm. An old Voran elder held the hands of 2 children. His voice was weak, but his words were strong. "Do not fear the fire," he said. "The fire protects us now. The children nodded, their eyes wide, watching as another human dropship descended through the burning clouds. In orbit, chaos ruled. The HMS Aurora was struck by 3 enemy torpedoes, its hull breaking apart. Its captain refused to abandon ship. "Keep firing," she shouted through the static. "If we go down, we take them with us." And she did. The Aurora rammed the largest Karn cruiser in range. Both exploded in a single flash of light that could be seen from the planet's surface. When Admiral Hart saw the blast, she whispered quietly, "Another one gone. Another hero." On the fleet's left flank, a small group of human fighters flew straight into the enemy's center line. Their leader, Commander Reyes, spoke through the open channel, his tone calm despite the chaos. "Target their command ship. If we hit it, the rest might scatter." His wingmen replied, "That's suicide." Reyes smiled softly. "Yeah, but it's our kind of suicide." The squadron dove as one, 12 tiny fighters against a mountain of steel. The Karn command ship opened fire, turning space into a field of light and death. One by one, the human fighters vanished. But Reyes made it through. He flew his craft straight into the ship's main reactor and detonated his missiles. The explosion ripped through the enemy fleet like a hurricane. Dozens of smaller ships lost power, spinning out of control. Admiral Hart's voice trembled for the first time. "They did it. By the stars, they actually did it." For a moment, silence fell over the battlefield. Only wreckage drifted between the stars. Human ships floated among clouds of fire and debris, their hulls glowing red with heat. Inside the Vanguard, the crew looked around, exhausted. Many were bleeding. Some had not slept for days. Yet no one stopped working. "Status?" Hart asked quietly. Her officer checked the readings. "Karn fleet at 60% destruction. The rest are retreating." "Retreating?" "Yes, ma'am. They're falling back beyond the moon's shadow." The Admiral took a long breath. "We hold position. No pursuit. Focus on rescue operations." As the human ships moved closer to the planet, the survivors looked up and saw the sky clearing. The black clouds faded, replaced by the light of burning Karn wrecks falling through the atmosphere. When the first human rescue teams landed, the Vorans gathered around them in silence. They expected monsters, the feared Deathworlders of legend. But what stepped out of the ships were men and women covered in soot and blood, their armor dented, their faces weary. Yet their eyes were kind. A Voran child approached one of them, a medic named Elena Cho. The little one reached out a trembling hand and touched her glove. "You came for us," the child said softly. Elena smiled, kneeling down. "Of course we did." "Why?" the child asked. "You didn't know us." Elena looked around at the ruins, then back at the small face before her. "Because someone had to." The child's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time since the war began, she smiled. Above them, Admiral Hart watched from orbit, her heart heavy with pride and loss. She knew the cost. Too many ships gone, too many brave souls burned among the stars. But when she looked at the planet below, at the people they had saved, she whispered, "It was worth it." The communication officer turned. "Ma'am, message from Voran Prime. They say, thank you." Hart smiled faintly, her eyes wet. "Tell them they don't owe us anything. Just rebuild, live. That's thanks enough." And as the battered human fleet drifted above the half-destroyed world, every survivor, human and Voran alike, knew one truth that would echo through history. When all others turn away, humans come. And sometimes that is enough to save the stars. The war was over, but the silence that followed was heavier than the sound of battle. Space around Voran Prime was filled with drifting metal and broken ships. The once bright orbit now looked like a graveyard of steel and fire. Some wrecks still burned quietly, small sparks against the black sky, the last heartbeat of machines and heroes alike. The human fleet hung above the planet, battered but unbroken. Half their ships were gone. The rest were scarred, engines damaged, hulls torn open. Yet they still stood guard, refusing to leave until every life below was safe. Inside the HMS Vanguard, Admiral Lena Hart stood alone by the viewport. Her reflection looked older than before. She had seen war many times, but this one had changed something inside her. Her communications officer entered softly. "Admiral, the survivors from Voron Prime are asking for you." Hart nodded. "Patch them through." A holographic image flickered to life before her. A group of Vorans, their silver skins stained with dust and soot. Behind them, the ruins of their once beautiful city glowed faintly in the morning light. The Voran leader bowed deeply. "Admiral Hart, we owe you our lives. We called into the dark, and you answered. No one else came. Only you." Hart's voice was quiet, almost tender. "You don't owe us anything. We just did what was right." The Voran hesitated, his glowing eyes filled with emotion. "We had given up hope. We believed the galaxy had forgotten us. But your people, they came without asking anything in return." Hart smiled faintly. "That's what humans do. When someone calls for help, we go." Down on the planet's surface, the scene was one of sorrow and survival. Human rescue teams worked side by side with Vorans, pulling survivors from the ruins, treating the wounded, and setting up temporary shelters. Drones carried supplies. Engineers repaired what little remained of the power grids. The air smelled of ash and rain, but for the first time in days, the sky was quiet. Medic Elena Cho knelt beside a young Voran girl, the same one she had saved during the battle. The child's hand was wrapped in bandages, and her eyes followed the humans curiously. Elena handed her a small piece of chocolate from her pack. "Try this," she said with a smile. The girl sniffed it, unsure. "What is it?" "It's sweet. A little piece of earth." The child took a tiny bite. Then her face lit up with surprise. "It's wonderful." Elena laughed softly. "We give it to children when they're brave. You were very brave." The girl smiled shyly. "Will you stay here, human?" Elena's smile faded a little. "For a while, but one day we'll have to go help someone else." The girl looked down at the chocolate, then back up at her. "Then I'll remember your taste, and your kindness." Elena blinked away a tear. "That's all I ask." In the days that followed, the Vorans began to rebuild. The humans helped them clear the ruins and bury their dead with honor. They taught them how to repair water systems, how to build stronger shelters, and how to create defenses in case the car never returned. Every night, the survivors would light small lanterns that floated into the air, one for each life lost. The humans joined them, standing in silence beneath the glowing sky. One lantern was released for every human ship that fell. For the Resolute, the Aurora, and the brave fighters who never came back. The Vorans sang softly in their native tongue, a song of peace and gratitude. It was said that even the stars seemed to listen. Far beyond Voron Prime, across the galaxy, news spread quickly. The Galactic Council, which had once ignored the Vorans' cry, now watched in silence as reports came in. Footage showed human ships burning in battle, soldiers risking their lives for strangers. The story of the Deathworlders' courage spread from world to world, whispered in disbelief. "The humans fought the Karn," said one alien ambassador. "And they won?" Another replied, voice soft with awe. "They fought for others. Not for conquest, not for reward." Even the most powerful empires, those who had turned away, began to question themselves. Some felt shame, Others felt respect, and many began to see humanity not as monsters, but as guardians. When the last evacuation shuttle left Voran Prime, the Vorans gathered at the landing field to say goodbye. Admiral Hart stood at the center, surrounded by her tired soldiers. The Voran leader approached and placed a small crystal in her hand, glowing faintly blue. "This is from our capital's heart," he said. "It once powered our cities. Now let it remind you of what you saved." Hart held the crystal close. "We'll keep it safe." The Voran leader bowed deeply. "And we will keep your memory alive, Deathworlder." She smiled. "Just call us human." As the fleet prepared to depart, Voran children stood waving up at the sky. Their voices echoed through the valleys, carried by the wind. "Goodbye, humans, come back someday." From orbit, the humans watched the small world grow smaller behind them. Admiral Hart placed the crystal on her console and whispered, "They'll be all right." And as the stars stretched into lines, the human fleet vanished into the dark once again, leaving behind not just survivors, but believers. Because now, across the galaxy, a new truth had begun to spread. When hope is gone, call for the humans. And somewhere far beyond the stars, the Deathworlders smiled, because that was exactly what they were waiting for. Months passed after the Battle of Voran Prime, but the memory of what the humans had done refused to fade. Across the galaxy, news spread faster than light. Videos, recordings, and eyewitness stories, all telling the same truth. When the galaxy turned away, humans came. When everyone gave up, they fought. Alien worlds that once spoke of humans with fear now spoke with wonder. The word Deathworlders no longer carried just terror, it carried respect. On the planet Aurelion, home to the Council of Races, ambassadors from hundreds of species gathered in the Grand Crystal Hall. It was a place of power and pride, where every decision shaped the stars. Yet that day, silence filled the chamber. The council leader, a tall being of a light named Soren, stood at the center. His voice trembled as he replayed a hologram from Voran Prime, human soldiers dragging injured Vorans to safety while their own ships burned in orbit. When the recording ended, no one spoke. Even the walls seemed to hold their breath. "They answered the distress call," Soren finally said. "When we did not." An ambassador from the Kethar Empire lowered her head. "We thought the Vorans were lost. We thought helping them was useless." Soren's light dimmed. And yet the Deathworlders did not think. They acted. Another voice spoke, deep and thoughtful. It came from a scaled being with golden eyes, a veteran of many wars. "Perhaps that is what makes them dangerous," he said. "But also, what makes them beautiful." Far away, in the dark corners of the galaxy, refugees whispered stories around campfires on broken moons. They told tales of the humans, how they came like storms, how they fought like gods, and how they wept for those they could not save. Some called them angels of war, others called them the children of chaos, but all agreed. When they arrived, hope returned. Back on Earth, the cities of humanity were quiet for once. The war had cost them dearly, ships lost, lives gone, families mourning. Yet despite the sorrow, there was pride in the air. In a small park in New London, people gathered around a new monument. It was made of black stone and shining steel, shaped like a human hand reaching out to a smaller one, the symbol of aid given freely. Names of the fallen were carved along the base, both human and Voran. Children placed flowers at the foot of the statue, while veterans stood in silence, remembering the faces of friends who never returned. Admiral Lena Hart was there too. She stood with her cap held to her chest, the Voran crystal glowing softly in her hand. Reporters asked her questions, but she said very little, when a child tugged her sleeve and asked, "Why did you go?" even when no one else did. She smiled faintly. "Because someone had to," she said. "And if not us, then who?" Meanwhile, on Voron Prime, life slowly began again. The cities were rebuilding, their towers rising from ashes. The Vorans had painted murals of humans across their rebuilt walls. Faces of soldiers, medics, and engineers who came from the stars to save them. In schools, Voran children learned about Earth. They studied human courage, human art, and even human humor. Some practiced speaking English, just so they could greet any human who came to visit. In their capital square stood a tall silver statue, a human soldier holding a Voran child in one arm and a rifle in the other. The words below were written in both their languages. They came not for glory, but for mercy, and we will never forget. In time, the Voran sent a message to Earth. It was broadcast across the stars, echoing in every language known. To the people of Earth and the Deathworlders, the protectors of the weak, and we thank you. Your courage saved our world, but your kindness saved our hearts. You are proof that strength and compassion can live together. It was said that when the message reached Earth, even the hardened soldiers of the fleet stood silently, many with tears in their eyes. Admiral Hart watched the transmission from her office aboard the HMS Vanguard. The Voran anthem played softly in the background, mixed with the sound of children laughing. She looked out at the stars and whispered, "We did what we had to. That's enough." Her second-in-command, Commander Ilias, stood beside her. "Do you think they'll remember us, Admiral?" Hart nodded slowly. "They already do. And that memory, it'll spread further than any fleet ever could." In the years to come, the words "call the humans" became something more than a phrase. It became a symbol. Whenever a world was in danger, whenever the Council failed, voices whispered those same words, hoping the Deathworlders would hear, and often, they did because humanity, born from a death world, had chosen its path long ago. Not to conquer, not to rule, but to protect even when no one else would. That night, as the Vanguard drifted quietly through the stars, Admiral Hart placed the glowing Voran crystal beside her bed. Its light pulsed softly, steady, alive, and full of hope. In that gentle light, she found peace, and across the galaxy, worlds whispered a promise carried on the wind of space. If the darkness ever comes again, the humans will return. Years passed since the Battle of Voron Prime. The galaxy had changed. Worlds once divided by fear now stood a little closer. The name Deathworlders was no longer spoken with dread. It had become a title of respect, a symbol of courage and hope. The humans had become the heartbeat of the galaxy's conscience, but peace, as always, never lasted forever. One cold cycle, a new distress call echoed through the void. It came from the far edge of the Orion Rim, a small mining world called Tireth 9. The message was desperate, broken, filled with static and fear. Unknown fleet, attacking, civilians trapped. Please, anyone. For 2 days no one answered. The Galactic Council debated, argued, hesitated. No one wanted another war. No one wanted to risk their fleets again, until a familiar signal appeared on every galactic channel. It was human. Admiral Lena Hart's voice came through, older now, quieter, but filled with the same fire. "This is the human fleet," she said. "We've heard the call. We're already en route." And across 1,000 worlds, people stopped what they were doing and listened. The humans were going again. The Deathworlders were answering another cry for help. When the HMS Vanguard and its escort ships arrived at Tireth 9, they found horror waiting. The invaders were not the Karn. They were something older, colder, and far more ruthless. Machines built for extermination, harvesting entire cities for energy. The human ships faced impossible odds. They were outnumbered 10-1. But Admiral Hart didn't flinch. "Open a channel," she said, her voice carried through the entire fleet. We've seen this before. We've seen fear. We've seen pain. But we will never turn away. Not now, not ever. Humanity stands for those who cannot stand for themselves. We fight not because we want war, but because someone must stand between the innocent and the dark. The fleet roared to life. The battle that followed was brutal. Laser fire cut through the night. Human ships burned, but none retreated. Fighters dove into enemy swarms, protecting evacuation shuttles at any cost. Admiral Hart's command ship took heavy damage, but she refused to abandon the bridge. Her hands gripped the console, eyes focused on the burning horizon. "Status of civilian ships?" she shouted. 70% evacuated, ma'am. But they won't all make it." Hart took a breath. "Then we'll buy them time. All ships, defensive wall around the transports. Make every second count." The human fleet formed a barrier of fire and steel. One by one their ships fell, but each one took a dozen enemy machines with it. The last of the civilian transports escaped the gravity well, engines flaring as they jumped to safety, and in that moment, Admiral Hart smiled, tired, broken but proud. "Mission complete," she whispered. "All lives saved." The Vanguard exploded moments later, taking the enemy command ship with it. The shockwave rolled across space like thunder. When the Council received the report, the chamber fell silent again, just as it had years ago after Voron Prime. But this time they did not hesitate. This time, they moved. Fleets from 100 species gathered, flying under one banner. Vorons, Kethar, Zenth, and dozens more, all united by one name, one memory. At the center of their combined formation was a flag, black and blue, with the symbol of Earth. The humans had fallen, but their legacy had not. The galaxy fought back together, inspired by the courage of those who had once stood alone. When the war finally ended, and the machines were gone, the galaxy mourned. But it was not the mourning of despair. It was of reverence. On Voron Prime, where the humans had first become legends, a new monument was built beside the old one. It showed Admiral Hart standing tall, her hand stretched toward the stars. Below it, the same words were carved in both human and alien script. They came when no one else would. They fell so others could rise. The Deathworlders live on in every act of courage. Years later, children across the stars learned about humanity. They read stories of Earth, of the fierce blue planet that raised warriors with hearts of fire. And whenever distress calls echoed through the void, the same words were whispered again, not as a prayer, but as a promise. If the darkness returns, they will come. Because somewhere deep in the silence of the cosmos, a beacon still shone, the last signal sent from the Vanguard before it was destroyed. It was a simple message. 4 words, carried endlessly through space. We heard the call, and even though the humans were gone, that message lived on, lighting a spark in every world that believed in hope, in unity, and in standing for what was right. In the end, the galaxy did not just remember the humans, they became what the humans had taught them to be: brave, kind, relentless, and far across the endless dark, where stars burned quietly, the light of Earth still shimmered. A reminder that true strength isn't born from power, but from the heart that refuses to stop caring.